decision for the entire urbanized area as a whole regarding the swap, whether we're in the swap or we're out of the swap, rather than individual organizations making their own choices. That's just the way the policy was set up through the DOT and the Iowa Transportation Commission. Stu Anderson is here with us this evening. Stu is the director of the Programming, Planning, and Modal Division of the Iowa DOT. I had incorrectly noted Stu's old job at the DOT in the memo, and I apologize for that. Stu will be able to give us some information from the DOT's perspective regarding the swap, and would also, I'm sure, be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Good afternoon, and thanks for allowing me to visit with you a little bit. I won't take much of your time. Kent really did an excellent job of providing some history of how we got to this point, so I'll just add on to it a little bit. I guess first of all, I'll add that Iowa is far from the first state that is going down the path of federal aid swap. In fact, in the Midwest, Minnesota, Indiana, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Ohio have already implemented federal aid swap in one form or another. And the reason those states and many others across the country have implemented a swap is because, as you likely know, federal funding comes with additional project development, regulations, and requirements. And typically what we find, not only in Iowa but across the country, is that local jurisdictions just don't typically have the in-house staff expertise to deal with those projects. Often don't get a lot of federal aid projects in a year, so just don't have the ability to deal with those in a really efficient manner. Of course, state DOTs, where we deal with many federal aid projects every year, we have an entire Office of Location and Environment that deals with the environmental requirements, and offices of contracts that deal solely with meeting those federal aid requirements. Typically, state DOTs can implement those projects more efficiently and at a lower cost. So therefore, as Kent said, the concept is to have federal funding that otherwise would be allocated to local jurisdictions to stay at the state DOT, and in exchange for an equivalent amount of state funding that cities and counties deal with every day through your regular road use tax fund allocations. Just through the reduced project development requirements alone, by doing this swap, the project development cycle is reduced at least 6 months for local projects through this. So merely from a time savings benefits, that's something we can quantify really easily. I certainly know that there are questions and concerns about this. I led the discussion at the legislative subcommittees and committees when this was deliberated last session, and these certainly were a topic of discussion at the Capitol when this was being deliberated. Certainly the question of, is this a way to avoid meeting federal aid requirements on projects, was a primary question. I think the thing that's most important to remember about federal aid swap is it doesn't change the amount of federal funding spent on road and bridge projects in the state of Iowa. The exact same amount of projects are being done in the state using federal aid before or after as before. The difference is that they're primarily done as DOT projects. So, just looking in the Johnson County area, coming up in the next couple years, we obviously have the Interstate 80, 380 mixed master reconstruction, which will see a tremendous amount of federal aid spent on it. But even there's a lot of bridge replacement projects coming up in the county in the next couple years that will also be federal aid projects. They probably wouldn't have been prior to the swap, but after the swap, if this proceeds, there'll be federal aid projects still in the Johnson County area. With that background, again, I'm here primarily if you have any questions or comments from that you want to ask the DOT, I'd be happy to address those.
I have a question. You said that one of the things that this swap would allow for is to get away from some of the regulations that are required at the federal level. So what specifically are the regulations that we would be getting away from?
Sure, and Kent mentioned the Davis-Bacon requirement for projects, that wage rate requirement for projects. That would not still exist for swap projects. But again, the state federal aid, the state DOT federal aid projects then would have those requirements on them. I think from our perspective, the more meaningful impact is what I referenced, the time savings. The DOT is the agency that is responsible to the federal government, that all federal aid projects follow all federal regulations and requirements. So to do that for local projects, our project development process requires a lot of steps and a lot of review of plans. So when those requirements go away, that's how we can reduce the process in our review by 6 months for local projects. So really, we think it's primarily a time savings process in addition to other things like that.
I appreciate you reiterating that, but you only told of one regulation that would be bypassed, and that was the Davis-Bacon. What other regulations would be circumvented by going this route?
Yeah, so that's, I guess, the most easily quantifiable one. The other federal oversight requirements are, there's like requirements that we have to do a lot of review of material certifications, financial record oversight, when obviously cities and counties are already able to do that oversight. There is a Buy America certification that goes away with this. Now, I would point out that the Buy America certification, the challenge with meeting that requirement isn't so much the use of American steel as much as it is the documentation and certification of that. But yeah, that's probably another one that was discussed quite a bit.
What about employment?
I'm sorry?
Like to hire the employee who's going to work on some project, is there any regulation that will go away? You don't have to use it, like you don't have to hire unions, maybe employers or...
No, the requirements, I mean, again, there's not a Davis-Bacon wage requirement, but kind of the letting process is still the same, which would be let through, the projects would go out for bid through the central office names, and it'd be the low bid would be the selected for the project.
Oh, but Davis-Bacon requires paying prevailing wage, correct? That's what Davis-Bacon, most people don't
Sorry,
know what,
yes.
they hear the word bacon and they hear that sizzling and they can smell the bacon cooking in the morning, but what this is about is paying prevailing wage.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
How about environmental review and any other review
Sure.
like that?
Yep, and that's a great question. Actually, a lot of time it was spent since the legislation passed with a couple different stakeholder committees, and one was entirely focused on the environmental side. And so they went through all the state and federal requirements for environmental review for projects. And really, I think what the bottom line conclusion is that most of the federal and state requirements regarding environmental, historic, and archaeological requirements apply to all projects regardless of funding source. There is a little bit of a shift. One of the requirements we call a NEPA process, the National Environmental Protection Act. That's kind of a formal process for documenting these requirements are met. For a federal aid project, the DOT takes the lead in that. Now, those requirements still exist, but for example, on a bridge project, it may be another federal agency that takes the lead. If it's like the Corps of Engineers that gets more involved in permitting. But for example, all the wetland permits, those all are required for all projects, regardless of funding source. So really, on the environmental side, there's really not much difference. And I think our environmental stakeholder committee, which included a lot of different groups, like the Sierra Club, I think they felt very comfortable with the process we're going down with SWAP.
Two questions. What will the new wage standard that the state will apply if they're not applying the Davis-Bacon standard? First question. And two, do we expect that the wages would go down or up in connection with what would happen if we authorize the swap? To be honest, I'm not sure what the standards or requirements are outside of federal aid projects. They'd be the same requirements that exist for your City of Iowa City LET projects that are just funded with state and local funding. So you may be able to answer that better with that expertise. But certainly that Davis-Bacon federal requirement doesn't exist. So we don't know whether the wages could go up or down based upon
Well,
whether we...
I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that with a federal aid projects, on average, the wages would be higher. But again, I think to really accurately answer that question, you have to look at the universe of all the projects being done in an area. So, for example, if Johnson County was the measure, it may be with a swap that overall the average wages go up just because of all the work that the DOT is going to be doing in the area in the next couple years. So it's a little difficult to answer that with a black and white question, but again, the same amount of federal funding subject to all those requirements still will be completed in the state of Iowa.
What about OSHA?
Is there basically freedom to go ahead and set our own wage floors?
You know, I think we really would defer to what your local council says. You know, I think we aren't, as an agency, advocating the application of local prevailing wage rates. But I think we defer to what your council says for your
Well,
projects.
in Coralville, we don't turn projects away. We want more projects.
Sure.
And the faster we can get those projects done, the more people are working. And, you know, there's some concern about the Davis-Bacon, but if that would be the case where we're paying more, that's what we're after. And, you know, my whole concern is for Coralville and to keep growing and keep going. And if the federal slows us down, that's a problem for me. That's not saying I'm not against wages. I want the wages to go up, but I want as many projects for this labor force as we can get. And we have a small window because our building season is not year round. I mean, we do work year round, but if we can get as many projects as we can, that means more people are working and they're working for more wages. Now that's what I want. And if Davis-Bacon is just a piece of paper, and the laborers are going to get more work and more wages, that's what I'm for.
Two questions. And I think okay. So the two questions I have, one I don't think you'll be able to answer because I think it speaks to what Terry was asking. The other question is how many projects are we looking at going to come online within this next year that you're talking about? Because there's a certain approach I have to this as we deliberate, but I'm just interested in how many projects we're thinking will come online with this swap.
In the MPO itself or statewide or?
Statewide.
You know, it's a little, and I'm sorry I'm not able to give you a good answer for that because it really depends on the program that each RPA and MPO puts together in the next couple months because those programs are being developed as we speak. I think in the MPO you typically average a project a year that's federal aid. Is that fair?
I would say at least a project a year in the last 5 to 10 years, multiple projects in our area. And Stu's right, we're developing the TIP now, our Transportation Improvement Program, and that draft program, which programs all the federal funding for our urbanized area, including the DOT's funding that's spent in our area, will be brought to you at your next meeting. A draft copy will be brought to you at your next meeting.
And when you
Other
say
concerns are the safety concerns. You mentioned the federal requirements, such as OSHA and safety requirements. There's a concern that if making the project more hasty, safety regulations are going to be bypassed in order to save money or to save time. Is that a concern?
No, it really isn't. Those OSHA requirements and job site requirements exist on all projects in the state, regardless of funding source. And there still are very specific, detailed design standards and guidance for all projects that are developed. So we don't feel there's any shortcoming in either designs of projects or the actual safety at the construction site itself.
I did want to quickly, to Kingsley's question and to Terry's question about setting a prevailing wage or a Davis-Bacon wage for our local projects. I discussed that with the Iowa City seated attorney, who is the MPO's attorney as well, and her determination was that we could not set our own prevailing wage for MPO projects. And there was, I believe, a Supreme Court case that involved Polk County a number of years ago, and I believe that's where she's coming up with that determination. Whether or not it's been tested again or will be tested again, I couldn't answer.
Well, another concern I have is that if we are able to bypass certain regulations, there can also be the misclassification that happens sometimes with jobs when you have subcontractors, and after a while you lose sight of who's in charge and who's getting paid what wage, and pretty soon you've got a lot of abuses happening.
I guess my only reaction to that would be that, every city and county in the state already develops a lot of projects with city and state funding. Which really is what this does, is this just allows a county that has a federally funded project to administer it the same way they administer a farm to market project right now with state funding. And that's not really my area, but I guess I haven't heard that there's been concerns with how cities and counties are administering their non-federal aid projects.
Right, but when you have, you're shifting where the funding is coming from, and and that's a streamlined process, more efficient, therefore saving money. I get all that. But the other thing that you're stating as an advantage is the bypassing of a lot of regulations, which are in place for a reason. And I don't see that the offset is worth bypassing things that are there for a reason.
So Lisa was talking about time savings, and time savings is cost savings, but how much? And, I'd rather pay a livable wage than to save enough money to buy one additional box culvert. How much, I don't think the savings are enough in this case to warrant paying what's not a prevailing or livable wage. So that's why I brought this up at our last
I
meeting.
disagree with you. I think there is a lot of cost savings. I disagree with you. You're saying just one box culvert.
Show your work, Tom.
It's considerable that
Yeah.
the
Well, box
savings.
culverts are expensive, but.
Yeah, but you're saying it's not a lot of savings, but there is a lot of savings. I mean, there's a lot of paperwork.
I've had federal grants. I've filled out the Davis-Bacon paperwork. I've done it before. I know what's involved, and it's sure there's paperwork involved, and sometimes you're not. You have to hire somebody sometimes additional, or give somebody an additional hours to fill out that additional paperwork. But as Lisa said, there's a reason for that, and I think that the reasons for me outweigh the reasons for not doing it.
If I could weigh in here real quick too, Mike, I appreciate you saying that, because one of the questions that I had while I have a conversation with our staff, and they said it would just cut back so much on the amount of time that we have to spend on this, which in turn is labor that our taxpayers are already spending to pay those folks. The unemployment rate in Johnson County is really low. Across the state, it's really low. So for any of these contractors coming to do work in North Liberty, they're going to have to be paying more than a livable wage. They're going to be paying a very competitive wage to keep these folks there so they can keep their promise as a company to complete a project on time. So I think the notion that folks aren't going to be paid a livable wage doesn't pass the smell test for me, because we have such a low amount of unemployment already. And if you want a job that will pay more, you can go find that. But your employer is going to want to keep you, especially if you have a short construction season. And they know how important it is to get these projects done, because there are timestamps on them. When we write a contract to make a project completed, we put a date on it. This is, you get 120 days to complete it. So that contractor is paying overtime. They're doing everything that they can to get these projects completed. So I understand where you're coming from. My question would have been to you then, what sort of evidence do you have, or do we have, to say that the rates that would have been paid with Davis-Bacon are any different than what are going to be paid as prevailing wage here right now as well? And I just don't know that there is going to be any significant difference, or as we may have heard already, there's probably going to be higher wages paid here than what would have been the baseline for Davis-Bacon.
Well, in the current climate, you're right. We have a very low unemployment rate locally and statewide. And so that might make for a more competitive wage, but that climate can change, and it can change very easily. And we will already have gone down this path, and then the door has been opened then for those potential undercutting of prevailing wage.
I'd like to respond to your comment.
Wait. I just want to make, just for,
Yeah.
are we done with questions? I just
Yeah.
want you to stand up there the
Well,
whole time.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I guess I would like to know how much time you're going to save.
Well, in the example that we can quantify in our project development process, we've shortened that 6 months for projects that are swapped.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea of what the statistics are on what other MPOs in the other states, or how much is opted out versus opting in? Are there any statistics to show that?
I don't really have a good answer for that for other states, just because each state does it a little differently in how they implement the swap. I can say in Iowa, so the decision to opt in or opt out is made by 27 RPAs and MPOs, and at least as far as I'm aware of, everyone is intending to participate. This is, MPO is the only one that I'm aware of anyway that is having the discussion about whether to opt out.
I have one question. Can you opt in and out, can you opt in and opt out once a year, every year?
Yeah, we would expect it to be an annual.
It's an annual opt-in or opt-out. So if we go with the state, we've got a year. If it's not looking good, we go back to the Davis-Bacon or the federal program, right?
Yeah, we would say that would be your decision every year as you're developing the program. And I think that raises another good point is, we know we don't have a great answer on the quantification of savings of this. So that is one thing we intend to do through this first year is work really
get a
hard to
track record,
quantify
right?
and track
Yeah.
the benefits of this, and if there's issues with it.
If there's issues with it, we go back.
Well, and we certainly have, when the Transportation Commission approved the policy, the discussion was that we expect that the policy will change as we learn. They understand that this probably will be an annual review for them as well, because it is new to the state of Iowa.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, and reminded me of that, and I appreciate that. And given that we can each year make that decision, I would think that it would be to our advantage to wait a year and let all of those groups that you say are already opting in to, be able to provide data that we can look at and say, oh, okay, this is really a great thing, and we should do it too.
No, I want to respond to Chris's question, and because it was directed at me. I'm sorry.
Do we have any questions for him?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
let's do the presentation, the presenter ask questions there
No, I don't
first,
have
and then
any.
we'll
Yeah.
deliberate.
Thanks, Steve.
So, thanks, Kingsley.
I think you've already said this, but just to clarify, for every federal dollar that comes to the state, the same number of dollars will be subject to the Davis-Bacon Act, even if we do
Yes.
the swap.
That's correct. Yes.
And to clarify on the question whether or not the other MPOs and regional planning affiliations in the state are planning to opt in or opt out, I was at the directors meeting last week in Ames, and I believe all the RPAs and MPOs were represented, and I believe we were the only ones debating whether or not to opt out.
Could you briefly describe the history of the Davis-Bacon? When was it enacted?
Boy, I'm sorry, I really don't. I mean, it's been around for quite some time. This isn't something that is in the last decade or two, but I really don't have that back.
I have 1931.
Yep.
Any other questions? And then we can go into deliberation.
Will the public have an opportunity to weigh in?
Yeah,
too?
and public, you bet.
Just a couple housekeeping things too. I'm sure Stu's happy to hang out, and I very much appreciate Stu being here. He's able to more eloquently discuss some of these broader topics than I am. I didn't mention, and again, as far as the MPO administration is concerned, we mentioned the last board meeting, we're not taking a stance either way. At this point, largely it's a political decision, and a lot of the efficiencies that may or may not be realized fall on your individual communities at the actual project development stage. So there's some things that the MPO will have to do, whether we opt in or opt out, but again, those are things we can work through later. But I did not mention, I think it's fair to note that the Technical Advisory Committee did recommend unanimously for the swap or to participate in the swap, and I thought you should know that. If and when we get to that point, I sense there's some, obviously some folks in the room that are not in favor of this. Just by way of when we get to the motion after the rest of the public comment, if we could state the motion is to opt out or not participate, I think that'd be the appropriate way, because unless we opt out, the DOT is already assuming we're in. So if we didn't have this discussion, we were opting in. So the motion would just be to opt out if and when we get to that point in time.
So in other words, if you want to opt out, you vote yes.
Yes, we would be voting to not participate, correct? You'd be voting yes.
I just want to
opt out.
clarify that.
Yeah. When we get to that point, and I think there's still some other public discussion, I just wanted to slip that in there while I had the chance.
Thanks for being here, Stu.
Somebody's.
Yeah, well, if there's no other questions for Stu, we'll open it up,
I know, I
I
hate
think at this
that.
point to public, and then we'll deliberate. Does that sound good?
Can I respond to?
No, there's a public.
Something that was directed at me, Steve?
That's fine, yeah.
I'm not sure if it was Tom or if it was Chris, regarding the prevailing wage and the amount of projects, and you were mentioned the unemployment rate and everything else. I've been on board supervisors for almost 4 years now, and we're doing about $15 to $20 million worth of road and bridge construction a year. And we've only awarded one contractor that's in the county, and that happens to be a North Liberty Asphalt Company, and has been the awardee of any of our contracts. So the wage in Johnson County is paid by, they are Johnson County taxpayers, and they pay that wage here in Johnson County, and the unemployment rate in Johnson County affects them. But most of our contracts are from companies some of them aren't even from Iowa, but from small town Iowa, Anamosa, you name it, and other places. And they're paying their people not what the prevailing wage is in Johnson County, but the prevailing wage in their home city and county. So that's a little bit different than talking about what the unemployment rate is in Johnson County and what our wage here is in Johnson County. And that's where Davis-Bacon comes in, is that you're paying that prevailing wage in that area. So that is, to me, is a huge factor that, because there's, as far as I know, there's only one road and bridge construction firm in.
Isn't this more of a deliberation issue, Mike?
What's
Isn't this
that?
more of a deliberation issue as opposed to?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yes, but I was responding to that. So thank you.
We'll open it up to public, so if somebody came in to speak on this item, step up to the podium, please.
Well, thank you. I'm Bill Gerhard. I live in Iowa City. I've lived here since 1969. I'm the president of the Iowa State Building Construction Trade Council. That's the umbrella organization that covers the 16 different crafts that do construction work in Iowa. For 20 years, I was secretary-treasurer of another organization called the Heavy Highway Subcommittee. That's the 6 crafts that do heavy highway work. We dealt with the DOT quite a bit. We dealt with the U.S. Department of Labor. I want to answer your question before I start on my spiel. If we don't have Davis-Bacon, the only other wage protection workers have is minimum wage. And you're right, you can't set your own prevailing wage. They tried it in Polk County. Master Builders of Iowa put a stop to that, just like they put a stop to people raising the minimum wage in the county. So we're stuck with Davis-Bacon or minimum wage. I'm passing out a couple things. Everyone talks about what the prevailing wage is. This is the prevailing wage for heavy highway now. You're familiar with this. This goes in the specs. This is what the contractors are required to pay if there's Davis-Bacon money in it. And it goes by craft and it goes by location. And there's 2 columns. One has what the wages on the check are. The other column is what goes toward fringe benefits, what goes toward health insurance, retirement, and training. That's only 3 items that can be used in the fringe benefit side. Obviously, the road swap is a way to circumvent Davis-Bacon. You asked how long has Davis-Bacon been around? It's been around for as long as I can remember. Both Davis and Bacon were Republican congressmen. One was a senator and one was a congressman. And it was primarily to stop contractors from coming into an area and bidding on who could pay the lowest and getting the jobs. It set the prevailing wage for the area. It's been in effect. 34 states had at one time a state Davis-Bacon, a mini Davis-Bacon. And I've got the other thing handed out is this thing. It's study after study after study that shows what happens when states had a Davis-Bacon and did away with it. There was no cost savings to the public entity. The workers suffered. They had less insurance because there was nothing in the line item for insurance. Quality went down. Safety went down. There's 4 pages here of study after study, including one here about Iowa. We were within 1 vote 10 years ago of getting a state prevailing wage here. I don't know where to go from here. You know, the people that go out there and work construction, and our union guys get a good scale, get a good pay. The prevailing wage isn't necessarily our scale. Sometimes in Des Moines or in the urban areas it is, but it really affects the open shop workers out there. This is a chance they have when they get on a Davis-Bacon job to have a decent wage and decent fringe benefits. And if that contractor doesn't have a bona fide fringe benefits for them, that column goes on the guy's check. So, and the neat thing I think about Davis-Bacon is that it's all enforced by the contractor sending in certified payrolls. And that certified payroll does a lot of stuff. It stops wage theft. It stops misclassification. It stops a lot of stuff we're seeing around here. And just because we have low unemployment, wages aren't rising. We have a $190 million project in Iowa City, the RISE project there. Most of the workers come from out of state. Most of the workers come from south of the border. Most of the workers are misclassified. They had an accident there 3 weeks ago where a guy fell and landed on some rebar, impaled his leg on a rebar. The ambulance came, and he wouldn't give the ambulance his name because he's afraid he's probably going to be deported. So just because unemployment's low and we have a lot of work doesn't mean that the workers benefit from that. So I'd be open to questions or whatever you want.
Bill, you mentioned misclassification, and I did too. And I know that it happened at University Hospital. I'm going to just call them out here in this public meeting because it happened. And can you just explain that a little bit?
Say that again, I'm sorry. I didn't
Just
hear the question.
explain what misclassification is, how it happens.
And it's sort of insidious. It's not saying, it's not like you're a laborer, but we're going to call you a carpenter. Misclassification is when the employer says, you're not an employee, you're an independent contractor. Therefore, I don't have to pay your Social Security. I don't have to pay you workman's comp. I don't have to pay unemployment. I'll pay you $12, $16, $20 an hour, and you're on your own. So when a person gets hurt, they don't carry, they don't have their own workman's comp insurance. It's an insidious way to pass, really, it's tax fraud when you think about it. And it's prevalent, it's almost become the model here. And the only way to stop that is to have some verification like a certified payroll. And then you can see, yes, he's on the payroll, he's an employee.
Thank you.
Bill, one thing that really jumped out at me in the report that you had handed out, and I've just had an opportunity to review it, so I was wondering whether you could provide some more detail, is on page 3 at the bottom of the paragraph. It says in prevailing wage or places that don't adopt or do adopt the prevailing wage standard, that the quote-unquote fatality rate from construction work site accidents is 25% lower in states with prevailing wage laws and 35% lower in states with strongest and best enforced prevailing wage laws. Has your organization been able to predict what the safety impact is numerically if we don't have the prevailing wage standard? Would we anticipate similar outcomes here?
I don't know about that. I just know that if a person cuts corners on wages, he's going to cut corners on safety. He's going to cut corners on quality. That's just all in how it goes. So that doesn't surprise me that the fatality rate's up or the accident rate's up.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, if there's anybody else, yeah, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name, I do not need to lose that because that's some of my notes. Sorry, let me go ahead and just close this. My name is Eric Schmidt. I am the political director for the Iowa Laborers Union. And we were heavily involved on this legislation last year up at the State House. We were obviously opposed to it for several reasons. I'm just going to read our organization's statement real quick and then just want to make a couple points and we'll answer any questions that you may have. But we don't agree with this legislation that was passed last year and hope that you guys do opt out of joining into this for several reasons. We feel that it's kind of a wolf in a sheep's cloak to avoid federal provisions tied to federal dollars. This includes environmental regulations for secondary roads and bridges, as well as avoiding the Davis-Bacon dollars in rural areas. And more importantly, the Buy American Act under Title 23, 313 USC Federal Highway Act. We feel this would undermine construction wages in rural areas, which could lead to a recruitment of out-of-state contractors. We also feel this law could hurt U.S. steel manufacturing, avoiding requirements under the Federal Highway Act. The state of Iowa's long-term infrastructure, we feel, deserves better than what this law has provided, and if those that decide to opt into it as well. Another point that we want to make, and I'm not here to call anybody out, but we do need to be careful on the way that this is sold. For one example, if this allows me to pop it open, there we go. In the Telegraph Herald, let's see, where's the quote? There we go. In the Telegraph Herald, I believe it was July 16th of 2014, and I can provide this to everybody as well. A gentleman with the Department of Transportation, I believe it was Mr. Anderson, was quoted saying, here we go. Where is it at? Sorry. It definitely would be an advantage, he said. We have quite a bit of federal funds that do come into the county that we use. While the dollar total award to each project likely would have to worry about we wouldn't have to worry about the stringent federal regulations that are normally tied to project funding, Anderson said. The concept of the project is that it can be done quicker. For example, the National Environmental Policy Act requires significant study, analysis, and oversight on federal projects. Local governments using federal funds must also follow the Buy American Act, which can dictate what type of steel can be used at that project, and a prevailing wage requirement that may make contractors more expensive when they have to pay those employees. None of those requirements would apply to this type of funding. So we do feel that the overall strategy here is to avoid the federal provisions that are put in place to make sure that a person on a federal project cannot be taken advantage of and actually have a way to a decent wage. To make sure that our farm-to-market roads and bridges aren't built with substandard materials. We want to make sure that it's materials that are built to actually make sure that our infrastructure can maintain and last. The environmental issues of it is another aspect of that. So red tape, that's annoying to all of us. But in the end, sometimes there is a few pieces of paper that you do have to fill out to make sure that a family does have that pathway to actually make sure that they have a decent wage. And to build on what Bill was saying and a few others, it does worry us that if you get rid of the federal provisions, that it could set up a rubric for recruiting an out-of-state workforce with an out-of-state contractor who might not apply or appeal to the same set of rules that many of our contractors here in the state of Iowa do. So for those reasons, we oppose this legislation that was passed last year. I would also state that through both chambers in the House and the Senate, subcommittee, full committee, and I know this is a nonpartisan group, but the minority party up there time and time again asked for empirical data that showed the cost savings. They were never provided that. They stated a made-up, for all we know, it was a made-up bridge in Kansas because they were never provided the material to show this example that they used in Kansas and how it saved money. Was it from the wages? Was it from the materials? We don't know. We never got a chance to see that. It was passed on party line votes, and I would imagine that the minority party, the reason they voted for it, for many of the reasons that I state here today, but also that they were never provided the empirical data and the evidence that they needed to justify why the legislation was passed. So I would answer any questions that anybody may have, or if there's none, I can just get out of your way. No? Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
And then if you need that article later, I'll be around afterwards and I can forward that to everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Just real quick, I'm Dale Balsinger, I'm with Labor's Local 43, and I am a construction worker. And I believe it was you, sir, that said Davis-Bacon was around since 1931? Yep. And Bill reiterated the reasoning for that is because out-of-state contractors came in here, lowballed contractors locally, drove wages down. I'm just going to leave you with the thought. Would you guys want a Miami Bridge contractor working in your area at this point in time?
Right.
Think about that.
Is there anybody else? Try to move this along. I know we've got a couple that may be leaving. Okay, nobody else? All right, I'll open up deliberation or entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we opt out of the state-federal swap.
Second.
Got a second from somewhere over here.
Two of us.
Yeah. So, okay, so we do have a motion on the table. Any discussion?
I think, Mr. Chairman, for the sake of making sure I know what I'm getting down here, we might do a roll call vote.
Oh, yeah,
When the
we
time
get to
comes.
that? Okay,
And Steve, as you know, I'll be recusing myself from the vote.
okay.
I was around for the TAC meeting. I'm the representative for University Heights. I listened to the engineers and some city administrators talk about it, and I supported them in voting to opt in. And I spoke at length to our city engineer, and it's going to be the best thing for University Heights to opt in, and I'm going to vote no to opt in.
I'll admit
I'm
something that
confused.
maybe all of us should do more of at a meeting, but, you know, Lisa, your comments, and Mike, your comments, and also these presenters, you know, give me a different way of looking at this, and you know, what's on the table right now is extremely important, not just to us, but to, you know, to who's here. So I get it, and I understand that. So I hope it happens to all of you at a council meeting or a supervisors meeting where your mind works and it kind of changes a little bit here. So what I don't understand is you know, I have my city staff or our city staff saying that this would save, but I also see the consequences of that, and that's a tough thing for me, and I believe it's tough for all of you out there, so it's not a simple answer. So I would be interested, and please don't hold back on your observations of why, because as a moment right now, I'm kind of struggling with this because I didn't think I would agree with Mike and Lisa as much as I do, but I understand where they're coming from. So if the more of you could speak, the better I would be informed in this.
I think Lisa made a really great point, is this question of empirical data. You know, why not wait for a year and see what happens in the other jurisdictions? I think one of the things with any health and safety standard or wage standard is that when you do remove that standard, for a while you have the same outcome because these standards have been built up over time. But I think to Labor's point, that eventually those get chipped down over time, and we don't want to lead the way in that occurring. So I think we need to have, and I think the other thing with terms of home rule authority, it's quite clear that we can't do project labor agreements, we can't set our own wage standards, we have no authority whatsoever. So if we do this, we cannot set a higher standard. If we had that home rule authority and that we could by region adopt that, I would be much more inclined to support that, but we don't. And so I think the practical impact is a lower wage over time, and I think the safety issue is not insignificant as well.
I agree with Rockne, and kind of going back to your point, Chris. I mean, I think this is an important conversation. We've had, you know, I think as a council we've had maybe 3 meetings to discuss. I mean, including the MPO meeting. I don't necessarily know if that's enough time. I mean, I think that this is something that is not only just important from obviously a jurisdictional standpoint, but the state standpoint. And so, for me, I would agree with Rockne, and you know, looking at the wait and see approach. And so I'm interested to see what other jurisdictions do. It sounds like all the other jurisdictions are going to opt into it, and so that's a lot of information and data that we can gain from that. I would tell you, going back to your point about city staff in general, I think I heard that loud and clear at our last meeting, that it would save time from a city staff standpoint. And so while I'm weighing and balancing that piece, I'm thinking about the fact that, you know, that's why I asked that question. Can we, how many projects come through in a year? And so obviously for our county or for our area, there's a number of different projects, but about 1. And so to that extent, I'm willing to wait a year. I want to see Coralville and other cities grow in our region as well. And so to that extent, I want to wait and see. And so I think there's more information. If there's a change from a legal ramification standpoint in a year, potentially, that could mean something different. But for me, I'd rather wait and see, opt out now, and then hear from, you know, the other counties and see from their data what's been the benefit and go from there.
Well, Chris, you were talking, and I appreciate you saying you have an open mind and that your mind is willing to change. That's something that's very refreshing to hear from an elected official. If I was just representing our secondary roads department and our county engineer, I know how they would vote on this because they're the ones that are doing the paperwork, and it would save them time. But I'm not elected to represent my county engineer and his staff. I'm elected to represent the citizens of Johnson County and protect the health, the safety, and the welfare of the citizens of Johnson County. And that means the safety of the workers. That means what they're paid. It means all of those things. And so I know that, Louise, if I was talking to my county engineers, and I think I know how probably my county engineers voted on at the technical committee, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But I am elected to present a different point of view and to represent a different constituency, and that's all of the people of Johnson County and not just our engineers.
Do you care that you'd save your taxpayers money?
How much?
For the cost of
How
the
much?
engineers.
How much?
It hasn't been
Yeah,
given.
it's a
Well,
little bit
I
of money, but at
actually-
what cost? What, I mean,
Well,
saving a little bit of money on
It's
paperwork.
not a little
It's
bit,
not a
I
little
don't think
bit of
it's a
money.
little bit of money.
Well,
It would be a lot to us.
That's a
Would
good
be lot
point,
to us.
Louise, and I think it would be a lot, but right now we don't know what, a lot is a relative term. And after a year, we will actually have numbers and know, and then we will be better informed to make a decision of, oh, yeah, we are in, and here's why, and here's how much it will save, as opposed to going in a little bit blind and going, well, there are going to be some savings, but we don't really know how much. And again, I'm weighing that against
Well,
all of the
we're
other-
very small, and like for our white sidewalk project on Sunset, I was part of going with the city engineer and having a meeting with all the contractors and everything. Probably none of you sit on those, but I've sat on those. And then I work with the engineer, and then he has to spend hours. He dots every I and cross every T, and then he has to go and take that information that he's working diligently on and fill out these long reports to say, this is what I'm doing. So it's a lot of money, I know it is. Because I've been there and watched what all the contractors say, organizing that, and I see it as a lot of money.
And I'm with Louise. We've had discussions with our staff, and the smaller towns and smaller communities obviously don't have the staff that the larger communities do. So it falls on Louise and our city administrator, and oftentimes me too, and Tiffin.
I wish we had a city administrator.
And I think
That would
the
help,
tax
too.
savings is not set. Nobody knows what it will be, but we're working at a way to try to save some money for our taxpayers in Tiffin. And the council and our engineering have discussed it, and they're wanting us to opt in for the city of Tiffin as well. We see some time savings on projects, which will save money and taxpayers. So
We're in the middle of the biggest project in the state, and I'm going to vote no, because I want that project done. It's for the safety of our citizens, and that's why I'm voting no.
But with all
And
due
I don't,
respect,
and I
won't this
really
project-
don't think it's going to change the wages that much. And we've got a year. It's just a year, and pretty much the projects are already going. So I'm going to vote no.
So these projects are still going to be done. There's still going to be funding for them.
That's right.
So
But
I
it-
agree with Lisa that
Again,
sit it out.
is it going to be 5 years for this project at I-80, or is it going to be 10?
I-
That's what I'm looking at.
I just,
Now,
I-
and if you drive on 965, you drive on 380, you drive on 80, I mean, that's a public safety hazard. That's what I'm after. I want this thing finished, and I want to get it done. And we are going to pay good wages. And you can argue all you want about Davis-Bacon and that, but it's for public safety. That's why those roads are being built. You can drive your driverless car on a dirt road, but we need that intersection.
I'm concerned about the expediting things and moving things along fast. Our organization, the Federation of Labor, every year, April, in fact, it's coming up soon, does a Workers' Memorial Service. And you'd be shocked in Iowa the number of workers who are killed on the job, and probably 95% of them are because the company cut
And they're
corners,
under Davis-Bacon
safety.
right now, right?
No.
They're under Davis-Bacon.
No, I'm not talking federal projects that were Davis-Bacon. I'm just talking local projects, but this is what happens
But
when
the rules
they
are
cut
in
corners.
place right now,
Yeah,
right? And these things are
only
happening.
for federal projects.
yeah. I'm not talking federal projects.
So what would the impact be on current projects? So for example, do we have an estimate as to the impact in terms of delay by reason of remaining where we are?
No, I don't think we do. As I mentioned earlier, we're currently drafting our transportation improvement program. Any project that's already been what the DOT considers federalized, so basically if that project has moved forward in any way, a design contract with the DOT, environmental review with the DOT and their peripheral organizations, that project would already be moving forward and would not be eligible for the swap. All projects that are new, that are being discussed, that maybe haven't been allocated MPO funds, those, of course, from here on out, depending on which way we go, would be either eligible or not eligible for the swap.
So I think Tom was talking about the 8380 project. that's already gone under that review, so that would not be eligible for the swap?
The 8380 project, my understanding would not be eligible for the swap because it's already begun. That's correct.
But there's other auxiliary projects along with that, right?
Yeah, there's other very large projects that will show
That's
up in
right.
the Transportation Improvement Program, several of which would be the potential widening of 380 towards Cedar Rapids, the potential widening of 80 towards Davenport, and so on. So as we mentioned earlier, we may only have one or two decent-sized DOT projects in our area in any given year, but I would say per dollar amount, we probably have more DOT funding in our district this year than any other in the state, or very close to it.
Just for me, as a person who work with construction worker all the time, who come to the Center for Worker Justice and complain about how they being treated, how they being misclassified at the construction place, I think we really need to have the, make sure, since we cannot even control what's going on right now because they are not using maybe city money or federal money, then if there is a chance we can, yes, have those certification in place and the requirement by the federal, we should go for that. We are a public servant here, at least me, I consider myself, and we should care about our people, which is the worker will be the resident of Johnson County, and they will supposed to get paid. We have to care about their safety, you have to care about the wages and everything. And I think when we hire, when they get paid, unions pay, that means they are in the right place and they are not going to be misclassified. They can have also the worker come and the safety in the workplace, and also using certified materials. I guess when the federal have this, they establish all this requirement, as Lisa said, it was for a reason. And yes, if we can wait 1 year to think about it more, and rather than rush it, will be great. Thank you.
I have a question for the state officials. Do you see the intent from the state, and Stu, maybe you're the best one to answer this, with the swap, that they would take federal money and basically consolidate that into a few large projects?
With the amount of federal aid that would be coming to the state, it would go on. It's hard, again, sorry, it's hard to quantify, but it'd be on a whole wide range of projects. We don't have enough big projects to utilize all the federal aid. So like I mentioned before, there's quite a few bridge replacement projects on Iowa 1 coming up in the next couple of years, which are $1.5 to $3 million projects, which before the swap would probably just be state-funded projects, but now will be federal aid projects. So I think we'll see a whole range of small, medium, and large projects at the DOT level being federal aid. As certainly your earlier discussion about the work on Interstate 80 and 380, that all will be DOT projects. That will be federal aid projects regardless of what you decide to do with the swap.
And I realize we're just getting started this, and a lot of the questions and procedures aren't yet fleshed out, but can you tell us anything about how the DOT is looking at going about whether or not to do a swap from project to project?
Well, the decision is entirely at the RPA and MPO level about swaps. So if an RPA or MPO decides to opt in, the program you develop will be the projects that are swapped.
Okay.
And I should point out, it'd be the road and bridge projects. Certainly, you have the discretion to allocate some of your federal funding, for example, for transit projects.
Mm-hmm.
Those would not be swapped because we don't have state funding that can swap out with transit projects. Those would continue to be federal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and to go just one step further, the DOT has already looked at our existing projects and our existing transportation improvement program, and they've actually done sort of an audit on each one of those projects and have already let us know which projects would be eligible for the swap. So they've already sort of done that baseline research to know if they've been, again, that term federalized or not.
Ken, would this facilitate expansion of 6-lane for I-380 as well as 6-lane for I-80? Would that make that process quicker if we do the swap?
That's a good question. I They would be federal aid projects anyways too, correct? So that process would be the same. Yeah, so they would not. That
I
process
just
would
don't know
be the
whether they
same.
would have access to more of the federal funds for purposes of those sorts of, okay.
That I can't answer. Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer to that. I would assume so, because the state funding then, if we were in the swap, would come to the local jurisdiction. So I suppose in some way they might have more access to federal funding, but
Not necessarily, okay.
but yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, the DOT, just like anyone, they have two pots of money, and those pots are finite. So, you know, whether you're using state funding or federal funding, it's a little nebulous, I guess.
I would like to take the opportunity to ask the union folks, what percentage of workers are minority? Your union members?
Our union members?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would say probably 20%. That's just a rough guess. There's 16 different unions and
Sure.
with the laborers.
This is where I'm getting caught at, is that we're paying attention to unions, and I can support that. But at the same time, we're also trying to provide means and opportunities for minority families to advance themselves. And I'm getting somewhat of a conflict, like, okay, what group are we eventually going to help or promote their general welfare? And so are we in fact, by denying it, denying ample opportunity for minority people to be involved in projects? Are we just going to go with the union and let them do what they want?
That assumes that minorities wouldn't be participating in unions to the same rate. I mean, obviously you said.
Can I respond to that?
Well, sure, if you would, please.
Let me come up here.
I would appreciate that.
The great thing about Davis-Bacon is anyone that works on the job, they could be an open shop contractor, a union contractor, those workers get that wages. They don't have to be a union. It's the union wages sort of help drive up the survey that causes what the prevailing wage rate is, but anyone that works on that job is going to get it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a union member. Most in Iowa here, I think in the heavy highway industry, our market share is probably 15 to 20%. So the bulk of the people in the heavy highway industry getting advantage of the Davis-Bacon money are really open shop contractors and open shop workers. And then I tell you what, in rural Iowa, these wages you see there are great wages. The Davis-Bacon's probably propped up most of the rural counties around here with the bridges and the box culverts and the roads and stuff, you know? So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, you did a nice job, thank you.
Okay.
I'll just add my view on this. I think the length of the discussion today indicates the challenge and the difficulty that we all are looking at. I think some people have come in, more decided than others in terms of their vote, but I think it's that challenge between following what we, I think, most times do, and that is the recommendations of the members of our staff, and engineering and others in terms of what's best for our community and how they work, versus looking at a broader good in terms of some of the federal requirements that come with the federal money. And I think a challenge for us as we sit here today is the fact that we don't really know the repercussions. We don't really know how much savings there's going to be. We don't really know what it's going to do to wages locally. We don't really know what it's going to do in terms of safety or quality of construction. Those are all kind of unknowns. For me, at this point, I'm going to vote that we opt out for this first year. And try and see what's happening across the state, get a better sense of what the rules are, and look at those when we have more information to really compare some of those pros and cons when we look at it in another year. It's probably the first time in over 8 years that I've been on city council that I've gone against probably what was a unanimous vote by our city staff. But I really think when we look at some of these other issues in terms of the wages, the certified payrolls, and those kinds of things, that we need to really be looking at those as well.
Susan, I really like what you said about the greater good, and I've been pretty quiet because this is my first meeting, and boy, what a first meeting to jump in on. But, I suppose I'm sensitive to all the concerns that the city staff would have, certainly sensitive to the the desire to be efficient and to, to cut through some of that red tape. However, the way I'm looking at this is, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about economic impact. And for me, it's very important that any economic impact is meaningful economic impact. So I have concerns when we move towards taking away regulations that will ensure a fair wage, that will ensure worker protections, because I firmly believe that everybody should benefit from these projects, and that includes the people that are working on them. And the safety piece is no small thing either. So I would agree that I think it's probably okay just to give it a little bit of time and to make sure that we are living up to the promise of, or that the other areas that are opting in are paying their workers a fair wage, and that those safety protections and those environmental protections are still in place.
Yeah, I'm going to support opting out as well. And I think, I understand a lot of the issues that we're facing with this. What I'll add to the conversation is that, as I asked, Davis-Bacon has been around since 1931. That's 87 years of legislation. The majority of states don't have the swap. I think it's good that we have this year to evaluate. I think that's critical, that this is not something we're locking ourselves into for more than a year. And in fact, it sounds like we may be one of the few MPOs that choose to opt out and may provide some better data in terms of understanding what the difference is between opting in and opting out. So that for those reasons, I'll be supporting opting out.
Has everybody said their piece?
I call for the vote.
I was going to say call.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Emily's going to help us out with the roll call votes. Just so everybody is very clear, a yes vote is for opting out of the swap, so not participating in the swap. Thank you.
Sally,
Yes.
Carberry,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Foster,
Yes.
Green Douglas,
Yes.
Berner,
No.
Mims,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Sayer,
Recusing.
Fromm,
No.
Donahue,
No.
Cole,
Yes.
Gill,
No.
Botchway,
Yes.
Huffman.
Yes.
1 second here. Yeah, so 4 noes. So we will be opting out of the participating swap, and I will make sure the DOT knows the board's wishes. Thank you.
All right,
I
thanks,
just want to say,
everybody.
again, sorry, Steve, thank you very much, everyone, for this conversation.
And thanks to Stu Anderson for coming from Ames for that
thanks,
discussion.
Stu.
It was very
Appreciate
helpful.
All right, we'll move on. We're up to 3B, consider approval of locally determined projects list for the fiscal year 2019 MPOJC Transportation Planning Work Program.
Yeah, thanks. So each spring, we compile a list of transportation planning work program projects for the upcoming fiscal year. This exercise is required by both the Federal Highway Administration as well as the DOT, but it also helps us plan and program for those projects coming, so data collection, any analysis we have to do, and so forth. And in your packet, I attached the list of work program projects we've received to date from either members of the Technical Advisory Committee or your respective staffs. We are very aware that other projects and data collection needs come up throughout the year, and in fact, I would argue that what's in the actual work program is maybe a third of the total work we do for a year or less. We're usually able to fit smaller unscheduled projects into the work program, but larger projects typically will not be able to be completed, and if they disrupt the work program in any significant way, we would bring those projects back to you all for your consideration and entry into the work program. What we would like from the board this afternoon is that you please review that attached list of projects and let me know of any additions or clarifications. Then we'll take the work program back, we'll augment the list with regularly occurring projects and state and federally required work, and then we'll bring the full work program back to you at your next meeting. The draft is due this Friday to the DOT, which is why we're discussing this tonight. The Transportation Technical Advisory Committee unanimously recommended approval at their March 20th meeting. And again, unless there's any changes to that list or questions about the list, we would look to you all for approval of that list of projects for the work program.
Move approval.
Motion? Is there a
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Passes.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 3C, we've got consider approval of the fiscal year 2019 MPOJC Transit Program of Projects.
Yeah, I'm Brad Newman, Assistant Transportation Planner. This is our annual program of projects for the 3 transit agencies, Iowa City, Coralville, and CAMBUS. This is our FY 2019 version. This includes all the federally funded programs or anticipated funding with federal funding are listed in the program of projects. Program of projects is a federal requirement, so that's why we're doing this. We also publish the program of projects in the local paper, requesting comment from the community, and they can request a public hearing for the board. We have not had any comments as of yet. The program of projects also goes into each transit system's consolidated funding application with the Iowa DOT, and will also require a public hearing at the council level. So those will be coming up later in April. Like I said, the TIP, these projects will also be included in the FY 19 to 22 Transportation Improvement Program, which will be coming to you as a draft in May, and then you'll finalize that in June. So all those program of projects will be included in your TIP as well, which will also require a public hearing. Technical Advisory Committee did recommend unanimously to approve the program of projects, and staff is requesting approval. Are there any questions?
Got a motion from somebody?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Moving on, we've got 3D. This is an update on the Crandic passenger rail study.
Yeah, at your last meeting, you requested more information on the ridership forecasting model that the DOT used in their I-380 study that included both autonomous vehicles and passenger rail. I did attach it's Appendix D from that report, or from that study that they had provided. It's the STOPS program. I don't know a whole lot about it. That's what it's called, but it was done through the DOT, and it includes their methodology and their assumptions that they used in gathering the information and providing that ridership analysis. So a lot of information in there. Feel free to give me a call if you have any questions on it. It's a lot to take in right now. But and then also the Phase 3 study for the passenger rail. We have not heard back from HDR, the consultant. We did meet with Crandic, HDR, and the Iowa DOT to discuss the scope. I think we have that figured out, and then we also discussed with them a separate rails to trails study as well. We're waiting on those, the scope to review and the cost for those studies. So I will get back to you when we hear on that. Yes?
Brad, just wanted to confirm that the scope, whether or not it includes study on what the projected rider fare would be.
Yes.
And operating costs, annual
Yep.
operating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Okay, next item 3E, we've got an update on MPO 2017 Transportation Planning Annual Report.
Yeah, thank you. Real quickly, attached in your packet is the 2017 MPOJC Transportation Planning Division report. The report outlines much of the work staff was able to complete last year, but certainly not all of it. I just wanted to show you sort of the type and breadth of work that was being required and requested of the MPO. I don't have any highlights to provide, but I did want to mention that I remain impressed with the kind of work that our staff is doing and the quality of work they're doing, and I'm looking forward to working with your entities in 2018. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I don't hear any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, moving on, 3F, we've got an update from Coralville staff on significant transportation projects in their community.
Yeah, I asked Dan Holderness, city engineer, to give us an update from Coralville, and we've been trying to do these, either every time we come to the community or every other, just to give an update on what significant projects they're working on. So thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you all. It's a big year for transportation projects in the city of Coralville this year. We have 2 major arterial street projects going on and 1 trail project. First major street project is on First Avenue from 6th Street to 9th Street in Coralville. It's the last major First Avenue safety improvement project south of I-80. So it's kind of the donut hole that we're trying to fill in now. That project started earlier this month, and it will be ongoing through November of this year. And for the majority of the project, there'll be 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction on First Avenue. And so it will have definitely impact on traffic in the area. They're working now on the east side of the highway, or the street. They'll move traffic to the east side head-to-head and then tear out the west side and rebuild the First Avenue 6th Street intersection with the Grand Railroad as well. And so once that's done, then they'll move traffic to the west side and work on the east side. We're going to have 4 through lanes and 1 center turn lane when we're done, improved sidewalks, streetscape elements, new traffic signals at First Avenue and 6th Street, First Avenue and 7th Street, and also 6th Street will have a 4th leg going east that will tie into East 2nd Avenue in the IRL, so we'll provide another access point in the IRL. So it's a great project, again started earlier this month and will extend through November of this year. There will be some landscaping and things probably carry over into 2019 because of the time of the year the project finishes. But the goal is to have all the traffic lanes, all the sidewalks, all the street lighting and traffic signals up and running this calendar year. Second major corridor project is out on Coral Ridge Avenue. It's a joint project with the City of Coralville and State of North Liberty. We're improving Coral Ridge Avenue from Oakdale Boulevard to Forever Green Road. This will be the final phase of the Coral Ridge Avenue improvements in the City of Coralville. It will go from 2 lanes to 4. Center median and turn lanes at all major intersections. There'll be improved traffic signals at Oakdale and Coral Ridge. There'll be improved traffic signals at Forever Green and Coral Ridge. And there'll be new signals at Coral Ridge and University Parkway and University and Wheaton Road. Also, there'll be a 10-foot trail on the west side of the project to connect the communities of Coralville and North Liberty. There'll also be an underpass immediately north of the Oakdale Boulevard intersection so that people can, pedestrians and bikes can get from one side of Coral Ridge to the other side safely without having to cross at grade. It'll be a great improvement for that. That project also started earlier this month. It will last through, again, November of this year. And the majority of this project, which we hope will help speed things up, is we're going to actually close Coral Ridge from right north of Oakdale to Wheaton Road and allow the contractor to have that traffic free. We'll do a detour on Oakdale to Cross Park to Wheaton, and we think that'll really help speed the process up to get the road done when they don't have to deal with traffic on a daily basis. Also, I should mention for both these projects, in the past we've experienced some issues with delays because of utility companies having to relocate their facilities out of the way of the street project. So we, on both Coral Ridge and First Avenue, had a utility duct bank project last year where we installed at the city's expense a duct bank for the utilities to move into and to put them underground so they know that they're in the right place and they're out of the way of our street project. And then we got reimbursed from that work for the majority of those utilities. And so with them being out of the way, we think it'll really minimize the delays on both these projects this year, and so we're really hoping that we can keep to our schedules and get things done in a timely manner and have minimize disruption to the public for these projects. And the final project we have is a trail project. It's our Clear Creek Trail Phase 6 and 7, and this is, we'll connect the existing end of the west end of Clear Creek Trail out to our Creekside Ballpark, and then goes on to connect to the city of Tiffin. And so it's kind of be the last leg of our Clear Creek Trail project, so we'll connect the Iowa City metro area, North Liberty with Tiffin, and heading on out west. So it's a very important project. That project started this month as well, and we anticipate that'll be done later this year, probably in the fall sometime. But that trail alignment does go underneath several I-80 bridges and I-380 bridges as well. And so we would anticipate as the systems interchange of 80 and 380 reconstruction goes on through the next few years, that there may be some times that trail will be closed as far as safety-wise, so that we don't injure anybody. But we're working with the DOT to get that done, and it's going to be a great project for the area. So with that, I'd take any questions you might have.
Dan, I have one. I sit on the board of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I've seen all the plans for the Iowa Arena and the IRL. And the drawings I had seen show 4 entrances into the IRL. I think 6th, 9th. I'm not sure what the street is where the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics is. And then another entrance really close to or off of the I-80 exit or entrance.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit and when that would be done?
Sure. Actually, there will be, you're correct, there will be 4 entrances into the IRL off of First Avenue. If you think about the IRL, it's got a great location because it's up against I-80, but the things that kind of are negative against it is it has the Iowa River on the east side and the south side and I-80 on the north side, so you can't have access, obviously, from the Iowa River or I-80, so it's real critical to get adequate access off of First Avenue. So going from south to north, there'll be an entrance at 6th Street. This is a new intersection that will be constructed with the First Avenue project. The existing 7th Street entrance, the existing 9th Street entrance, and then there's a 4th entrance that's closer to the interchange planned. It will be an extension of what's called IRL Place now, and that will be constructed when we work with the DOT to reconstruct the I-80 First Avenue interchange. We just recently got the IJR, which is the Interchange Justification Report, approved by the DOT and by FHWA, and that's the report you have to do to justify to the FHWA that you're not negatively impacting the traffic carrying capacity of I-80 with the improvements you want to do to the interchange. And so that, we literally worked on that for 14 years, and have just signed recently, and the NEPA document was signed recently, and so that's all in place now. And so now we're working with DOT staff to cost share the preliminary design of that interchange. And so we would hope to get that done by this time next year and try to get into the 5-year road plan that will be approved a year from this spring.
Thank you.
Do you know the anticipated duration of the full closure of Coral Ridge?
It will be from May through potentially November. But one thing I would say, we have a good contractor on that project, and they're already coming to us with ideas how to advance portions of the work. And so they're being very aggressive about the schedule. And so we hope that based on their desire to be aggressive and the fact that we're literally closing the road and giving it to the contractor, we hope to advance that schedule if possible. And also depends on the weather. If we have a good year, that always makes things go quicker as well. But we, the way it's set up now, it's May through November.
Thanks.
Just one more on Clear Creek Trail. You talk about phase 6 and 7. Done both of them this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The last information I had that was maybe it was going to be a 2-year project to get it all the way to Tiffin.
We bid that project through the DOT this winter and got a contractor on board, our Bridge and Culvert from Washington, and we had our first meeting here a few weeks ago, and they're being very aggressive on this schedule, and they really want to get this done this year and not towards the end of the year. So again, weather dependent, they really are going at it hard and strong, and so we appreciate that, and so hopefully it'll be done sooner.
That's great news. Thank you.
No question for Dan, but I did want to thank him and also mention that the vast majority of those projects, most if not all of the ones Dan mentioned, have MPO funding in them in a significant amount. Coralville's been very successful with securing MPO funding, and I think they've done a really nice job of using those funds.
Well,
Anything else?
It's a good MPO that works very hard.
Yeah, thank you.
If that's it, I guess I'll obtain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Got a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.